Good evening, YouTube. This is the Atheist Chef. Now, if you have not heard recently, about 2 weeks ago, FSX 23 had a hangout, and in the middle of the hangout, a fan favorite theist known as Shani Is Mean, also known as Shannon, or the Amazing Ex-Atheist, has released a statement that, well, you'll just have to see for yourself to believe. Now, and I say this kind of a joking way, but Shannon, and I'm going to send this to you because I want you to see this. I am going to really take this as serious as humanly possible. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I understand that you're a fundamentalist, and I understand the, a bit of the psychology rather, of, being a fundamentalist. This has to be absolutely, the Bible needs to be 100% correct. And I used to be a fundamentalist myself. So I want to try and see if maybe I can help. All right, so let's begin.
I don't believe space is the way they claim it to be. I don't believe there are planets out there. I don't believe there are these big asteroids, and I don't believe that. I believe that when you look up, you're looking at the the second heaven.
For those of you that have never heard the term second heaven, it's because it's not technically in the Bible. There's actually a whole history of 7 levels of heaven, and then that's in the book of Enoch. But it's a little bit different. But in 2 Corinthians, Paul is actually referring to the third heaven, which he considers the heaven where God is. And the first heaven is basically the earth. And second heaven is basically, there's actually some disagreement. Some fundamentalists say that second heaven is actually hell. But there's also a split between that and those people that say the second heaven is basically everything in space. Anything in the observable universe that is not Earth is the second heaven.
And the stars are actual, like, either demonstrate or like pillars of angels or actual angels. But
so I was doing some research on the Pillar of Angels, and literally the only thing I could find of Pillar of Angels is in Strasbourg, France, and basically there's a cathedral. It's been around for quite some time, and literally the center is like a tower, and there's just statues of angels all the way up to the top. That is the only reference to a pillar of angels that I find in the world, and including the Bible. So honestly, I have no idea. And the only other thing, there's the pillar of salt, which Lot was turned into, and then there was the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, which the Israelites were actually using. They were being guided by a volcano, cloud by day, fire by night, an active volcano. But nothing I could honestly find is a pillar of angels. I honestly have no idea. If I don't see it in the Bible, so I don't know where it's coming from.
since we're here on Earth, we can't see them at the same frequency.
Frequency is the number of occurrences of a repeating event per unit time. So basically, there has to be something happening to have a frequency. So let's just say if I'm moving my hands like this up here, there is a frequency being made. But if I'm sitting still, there's no frequency. But if I'm moving faster, you have a faster frequency, a higher frequency. If it's slower, lower frequency. So to say that an angel is at a different frequency, you would have to be saying that angels are vibrating or doing something in which there is a constant repetition. See, that's a term the term of frequency, it's kind of, it gets used quite improperly, and we see this a lot with spirit science, and they're like, our hearts are at a different frequency, and our brain is at a different frequency, it doesn't mean anything. It's being improperly used.
As what they are, because we are, in a different dimensional type form.
There's 2 times when you actually bring up the phrase about dimension, and I'm going to settle this one, at least this little bit, and I'll cover the second one a little bit later, about the concept of it being a different dimension. Now, I don't think you mean it like many people try to use it like, oh, it's a different dimension, like it's a different universe. But the stars and planets and things and even asteroids, you said, they're inside of our universe. They are, if the second heaven includes everything inside of deep space, everything just shy of heaven and just outside of Earth, that's everything. The claim that it's being distorted because it's in sort of a different dimension and we're perceiving it differently, there's nothing to back that up. It's definitely not biblical. There's nothing in the Bible that says anything close to that. And there's nothing in science that says that either. I mean, if you look at the planets and stars, I mean, we can get pieces of planets. We have, like, when the moon, we got chunks of the moon. We have meteors and asteroids that have fallen and hidden Earth. We can look at those. We have those in our possession. We can figure out what elements and what things are on these different planets. We can figure out how big they are, what they look like, what they... to say that it's some sort of distortion, that we're just looking at an illusion, it doesn't make any sense. It's not supported by science or the Bible.
Yeah,
well, that was going to be my next question, Shannon. I mean, because the Bible talks about the stars and being created by God. I mean, but you're saying...
But it also refers to stars as angels, too.
Oh, damn.
Yes, Shannon is correct that there are many scriptures that refer to angels as the host of heaven, and sometimes they refer to the stars as host of heaven. So there is a bit where you see the host of heaven refer to both in the same sentence, or one or the other. We even see that there are certain points in, I think it's Corinthians, whatever, or maybe Colossians, where they are talking about the times when the Israelites were caught worshiping stars. I think this is also in Deuteronomy. Now this is showing that, yes, they're using host of heavens to represent two things, but that's no reason to say that stars are angels. That just means that the Jewish people were using like basically how the host of heaven, basically a great multitude, just like how there's a multitude of stars and a multitude of angels. But there's not any real distinction or any point really saying, yeah, stars are angels.
Yeah, I believe exactly what the Bible says it is. Like, I don't care what science says. Frankly, I don't give a damn, because I believe it's all controlled by the big old Satan right now.
I see nothing in the Bible that says that the devil is controlling science, and this also, plays into the bit about the fear that trusting that science is true is anti-God. I mean, there are many Christians out there that can believe in science, and you can still be a Christian. Just because you may believe in something that science says, it doesn't mean that God isn't right, or God isn't true, or the whole Christian claim is false. There's nothing wrong with that.
Every single thing you see, you're being completely deceived. We're in the strong delusion, and I'm not going to trust anything that they have to say. I'm only going to trust what's in the Bible. Yes, I know in the Bible they talk about Orion and Pleiades, but you also have to realize Orion and Pleiades are in the sky, yes, but there's also fallen angels. And since the Bible refers to stars as fallen angels, I do believe the stars are fallen angels in the second heaven. And I believe Orion and Pleiades are actual beings. And because it says even in the Bible that Lucifer can turn into a being of light.
The Bible refers to Orion and the Pleiades. The Orion is, of course, the Orion Belt, and the Pleiades is a 7-star cluster. And you may actually recognize this from, there was a Cosmos episode recently, and they actually talked about it, and it actually has a whole lot of historical roots from the Chinese and, basically throughout the globe. They all have their own stories. But in the Bible itself, it talks about it in Job. 2 different times. One time was about the actual creation of it, but then also Job 38:31. Job has been complaining, and God's response is, "Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt?" This is a blatantly obvious connection to the star constellation of, of Orion's belt. I mean, that is a very common understanding. Like, okay, yeah, Orion's belt. Can you loosen Orion's belt? This is a clear indication of the belt, and not like three angels lined up side by side. And so, and I just want to add to this. It's these people also know how to be poetic. This is a human writing. It can be inspired by God, but it doesn't mean that 100% of what is said is absolutely as you read it. And I'm sure, as Veckel has probably said the word hermeneutics enough times with Alex Botten the other night, you have to understand the hermeneutics in the context of the situation. But you say that Orion and Pleiades were a real being. Well, let's go with what the Greeks had to say. And again, this is coming from the Cosmos story and what I remember. Orion was a great hunter, and he saw 7 beautiful women, and there were 7 sisters, and he began to pursue them, and they were running and running and running away from him, and they prayed out to Zeus to get away from him. And then he turned them into doves or pigeons, and then which they eventually became the stars. And then Orion still continued. You wanted him so badly. Eventually, they made him into the constellation. That's why they're like right next to each other, as if he is still pursuing them to this day. Now, that is basically the story behind the Greeks. So, to say that they were real beings. There is nothing in the Bible that says that they were real beings. So you're kind of really just making it up. I mean, I'm not trying to say that meanly, but if you say that you trust the Bible, then if the Bible is saying that there's nothing about it being that's real angels, then they probably weren't really beings. And as I said before, it is obvious that the scriptures are referring to star constellations and not angels.
So,
wait, do you believe the
Now,
moon?
Mike, you wanted to say something earlier.
Binoculars. If you
I just want to know, do you believe the moon exists, or is that not real?
I believe the moon is a light source.
And if you're a fundamentalist, then absolutely it makes sense that the Earth, the moon is a source of light. We have Genesis 1:16. God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser night to govern the night. Psalms 136:7-9. To him who made the great lights, etc., is everlasting. The sun to rule by the day, for his loving kindness is everlasting. The moon and the stars rule by night. The moon is a separate light. Isaiah 13:10. For the stars of the heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light. Again, that's lets it think that it's shedding its own light, which is weird because they're saying the sun will be dark. Revelation 16:12. I looked, and when he wrote the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. And to me, it sounds like they're saying there's going to be a solar eclipse, which is where you see it looks like the sun is black because the moon's covering it, so it looks like the sun is black. And then they're saying that the whole moon will become like blood, which is going to be what happens during the lunar eclipse. But that to me doesn't make sense. You don't ever see that happening at the same time. So if it's not saying that, then it's saying that the sun would just become black for one reason or another, like they turn off the light. But if that's the case, that means the moon wouldn't be able to be red because there would be no light. So it depends on some sort of light to reflect light. So it's either one of those two situations. Either one couldn't happen because a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse can't happen, or they're just completely still thinking that the moon sheds its own light, and for some reason it becomes red. Isaiah 30:26, the light of the moon will be as light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be 7 times brighter. So what we take from this is that they're saying at this day of this event that the light from the moon will be a lot brighter, and the sun will now be 7 times brighter. Now, a lot of people may say, well, no, see, you're getting it backwards. You're kind of reading it in the manner of saying, because the light will be 7 times brighter, that means the light of the moon will be, it will now be just like the sun as well. Well, I applied proper hermeneutics and studied all the other scriptures that talked about the moon, and this is the one that best fits all the interpretations. So, anyways, but the point is this. With the concept, the fundamentalist or literalist concept that the moon is its own source of light, it completely makes sense. And I totally understand where she's coming from here. But I'm going to try and help refute that, or at least help change your mind on that, at least about the moon.
Like
Wow. A big piece of rock?
Wow, so it's not a
Shannon.
piece of rock.
I don't believe it is.
Well, despite how you feel, we have rocks that we got from the moon. We've been able to distinguish what characteristics it has, what it's made up, and we know that the moon, is about 81 million pounds.
Shannon, do you believe what you see when you look through binoculars?
I believe in what I see. Okay, I can see there's 2 lights in the sky. One at night, that's the moon, and then one during the day, and
All right.
that's the sun.
Yeah.
I see 2 different distinct lights. Okay?
But
Can
you
I actually observe
don't
that
believe-
the moon is actually a rock? No, because I can't get into that place.
I want to point out here that she does say that she trusts what she sees here. But again, as far as she then points out that, but I can't get there. You may not be able to, Shannon. However, fortunately for all of us that can't get there, we've been to the moon 6 times. We've left crap up there. We've left up a mirror up there that scientists, up till the past few years, have been pointing up lasers and pointing right back at us and doing the math and figuring out how far the moon is receding away from us.
Well, I got some advice for you, Shannon. Head out to Walmart, buy a cheap plastic 1999 telescope, and look at the moon. Look at Mars. Actually, Mars is in a good rotation right now to where you can actually see it.
How about no?
How about yes? Because
How
if
about
you
no?
get this stuff
Because I
about
walk by
angels
faith,
existing,
not by sight.
She's quoting 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we live by faith and not by sight. This is a scripture, the context / hermeneutics is involved with basically they're wanting to go to heaven, waiting for the new body, and so that's we live by faith and not by sight. This is not a context involving, if you see something and you don't know if it's true or not, well, have faith in God. It's not saying just because somebody tells you it's a moon and you think that the scripture says it's stars or the angel, that's not what the scripture is talking about. But how far can you go with this, Shannon? I mean, let's just stop for a moment and think. Okay, so you live by faith and not by sight. So when you get out of bed in the morning and you're wandering around, are you using faith to get around? Or are you using sight? When you're driving and you're avoiding the oncoming cars, are you using sight? You're dependent on your sight to interpret the reality around you as it currently is. You're using your sight to read the Bible. You cannot escape using your sight and using your reasoning and logic to put things together. So, but you can only go so far with this. There's a certain point where you can't really be literal with this anymore. And you just need to kind of step it back just a little bit more and have just a little bit more trust in your sight than you currently do. Because you do put trust in your sight more than you're claiming you are. More than you think you do.
there are times in the night sky you can see a full moon, and there are craters on it. It looks like something that's been bombarded by
it could be a crater, but I'm not going to go and say that it is a crater.
This is satellite imagery from NASA of the moon. These are the craters. So please explain to me and everybody else out there, and to yourself, is there anything in the Bible that would lead you to believe that these aren't craters, that these aren't signs of rocks hitting it from something else? Is there anything biblically that could say that it was something else? What would explain that? And if you don't know, if you can't come up with anything, there's a good reason for it.
Oh no, no.
Okay, so Shannon,
God.
so Shannon, I'm curious. If you said the moon is just a light source, what exactly do you mean by that? I mean, especially when you can actually see the detail on it, you can see the craters on it. Are you saying that it's not anything physical? That it's just a light?
So
Or are you
I
saying?
can look to an LED type sun lamp, and it has little crevices and stuff on it.
There is a big difference in the little divots you're going to see here in this LED type sun lamp, and then what you're going to see here on this moon. The craters are all different sizes, been hit by different types of rocks, all this kind of different stuff. That's something completely different altogether. That's like saying, here we have this thing and it's orange and has little bumps and feely things on it, and this is orange and this has little bumpy things on it. They must obviously be the same thing.
But how do you explain the shadows on the moon?
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
And this is where your brain had a split decision, where you could learn to accept the fact that you could be wrong, and that there was something that made sense. You could hear it in the hesitation, but you just said, I'm not going to. Because they have a point. There's shadows of the craters on the moon. There's the fact that the sun is reflecting, onto the moon. And if the sun was actually, if the moon was its own light source, we would never be seeing a third moon or quarter moon or whatever, a waxing moon, a waning moon. We would be constantly seeing the light. Even during the solar eclipse or the lunar eclipse, we would still be seeing light coming from the moon, even if the sun is brighter. But you don't want to accept that. And it's obvious by the way you respond and say that you're not going to.
But see, when you look at something and you're in a lower dimension than that thing, of course.
Okay, what's a dimension in your perspective? What do you
have a
consider
different type
a
of
dimension?
dimension.
To you on.
Hey, what do you think a dimension is?
This part here, Shannon, is where you figured out you really don't know how to describe another dimension. And so you tried to spin it back on him. This is also a very telling sign that you didn't really know what you know, and were using basically just a misinterpretation of things that you may have heard, or things that you may have kind of contrived in your head based on bad definitions of words, and couldn't defend it.
Galileo.
Came out a video with
Galileo.
Because every YouTube video on YouTube is true.
Galileo.
it was Carl Sagan talking about it, so you really can't say much.
The video, which I assume that Shannon is referring to, is from Carl Sagan, where he's trying to help people understand the definition of, basically jumping in from one dimension to the next. What he does is he gets he puts a piece of paper and he shows a whole flat layout of a 2D world. So his first two dimensions are length and width. And what he says, what would happen if that paper was introduced to the third dimension, height? And so the people that were in this two dimensions wouldn't be able to see this third dimension, because it's coming down. It's a completely different dimension. They can only look down, to the side, left and right. They don't know up. And so she tries to equate this by saying this is what it's like for the angels on the, the things that we're seeing here. That saying that if we're on this other dimension, they're on this higher dimension, then what we're seeing is something different. However, there's two things to point out. That is, one, if that was the case, if you're going to try and make that analogous, that means we would, if they were on a higher dimension, then we wouldn't be able to see them, which is what Carl Sagan was pointing out in the third dimension. They wouldn't be able to see that at all. So your claim of that we just see it differently because they're in a different, it's some sort of distortion or whatever, falls flat right there. Secondly, the fact is, from the third dimension, say, which is we're in a 3D space, a 3D dimension, to the fourth dimension is time, and beyond that it's a splitting of time, and then once it gets to like the fifth, the sixth, seventh, eighth, all these different dimensions, it's really, really bizarre. It's not just regular. It's not like, what we see is 3D space. 3D space is all that we can actually perceive. Beyond that is time. So there is no other dimension that we could actually, that these angels, or however you want to interpret them, could be, and we actually perceive them. First, second, and third dimension. So again, it's just incorrect. So that's about all I got to say there, Shannon. I apologize for this being like 25 minutes long. I really want you to really try and take hold of this. I really try to be as respectful as possible, and I don't mean to be mean or insulting or anything. I want you to understand is that what you're claiming, it has no biblical backing other than what you assume is meant by calling the host of heaven angels and stars. Sometimes they mean both, sometimes they mean one or the other. But to claim that all stars are angels is just not supported. And like I said, I've given the scriptures to show that obviously the Bible had reference to obvious constellations such as Orion and the Pleiades, and they refer to them as constellation and as not as angels. There's nothing in there. There's other than that one little bit to make you feel that way, and it's not supported by science. The moon is real. It has a weight. It has a mass. We interact with it. Our tides are affected by it. It goes back and forth. The Earth and the Moon kind of wobble back and forth between the fighting for the gravity between Moon and the gravity from the Sun from the other side. It's as real as humanly possible, just like the other planets. They're not in other dimensions. We wouldn't be able to perceive them. You have a literalist hang-up, and you have to be 100% literal because you don't seem to want to really think about it. But you have to understand, Shannon, other Christians are out there. Even your fellow fundamentalist believers like Veckel and G-Man and these people that you hang out with, they believe the moon is real and they do not believe that the stars are angels. And there are people that accept science beyond that. You are one of few. Very, very, very few. There are others out there like you that believe the moon is a hoax. And it's really quite interesting to hear the theories like it's a giant hologram. But you're better than that, Shannon. You have to be. You just have to be. This is the Atheist Chef signing off. See if maybe I can help. Alright, so let's begin.
I don't believe space is the way they claim it to be. I don't believe there are planets out there. I don't believe there are these big asteroids, and I don't believe that. I believe that when you look up, you're looking at the the second heaven.
For those of you that have never heard the term second heaven, it's because it's not technically in the Bible. There's actually a whole history of 7 levels of heaven, and then that's in the book of Enoch. But it's a little bit different. But in 2 Corinthians, Paul is actually referring to the third heaven, which he considers the heaven where God is. And the first heaven is basically the earth. And second heaven is basically, there's actually some disagreement. Some fundamentalists say that second heaven is actually angels are vibrating or doing something in which there is a constant repetition. See, that's a term that the term of frequency, it's kind of it gets used quite improperly, and we see this a lot with spirit science, and they're like, our hearts are at a different frequency and our brain is at a different frequency, and or it doesn't mean anything. It's being improperly used
as what they are, because we are, in a different dimensional type form.
There's two times when you actually bring up the phrase about dimension, and I'm going to settle this one, at least this little bit, and I'll cover the second one a little bit later, about the concept of it being a different dimension. Now, I don't think you mean it like many people try to use it like, oh, it's a different dimension, like it's a different universe. But the stars and planets and things and even asteroids, you said cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, which the Israelites were actually using. They were being guided by a volcano, cloud by day, fire by night, an active volcano. But nothing I could honestly find is a pillar of angels. I honestly have no idea. If I don't see it in the Bible, so I don't know where it's coming from.
Since we're here on Earth, we can't see them at the same frequency.
Frequency is the number of occurrences of a repeating event per unit time. So basically, there has to be something happening to have a frequency. So let's just say if I'm moving my hands like this up here, there is a frequency being made. But if I'm sitting still, there's no frequency. But if I'm moving faster, you have a faster frequency, a higher frequency. If it's slower, lower frequency. So to say that an angel is at a different frequency, you would have to be saying that, good evening YouTube, this is the Atheist Chef. Now, if you have not heard recently, about 2 weeks ago, FSX23 had a hangout, and in the middle of the hangout, a fan favorite theist known as Shani Is Mean, also known as Shannon, or the Amazing Ex-Atheist, has released a statement that, well, you'll just have to see for yourself to believe. Now, and I say this kind of a joking way, but Shannon, and I'm going to send this to you because I want you to see this. I am going to really take this as serious as humanly possible. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I understand that you're a fundamentalist, and I understand the, a bit of the psychology rather, of, being a fundamentalist. This has to be absolutely, the Bible needs to be 100% correct. And I used to be a fundamentalist myself. So I want to try and see hell. But there's also a split between that and those people that say the second heaven is basically everything in space. Anything in the observable universe that is not Earth is the second heaven.
And the stars are actual, like, either demonstrate or like pillars of angels or actual angels. But
so I was doing some research on the pillar of angels, and literally the only thing I could find of pillar of angels is in Strasbourg, France, and basically there's a cathedral. It's been around for quite some time, and literally the center is like a tower, and there's just statues of angels all the way up to the top. That is the only reference to a pillar of angels that I find in the world, and including the Bible. So honestly, I have no idea. And the only other thing, there's the pillar of salt, which Lot was turned into. And then there was the pillar of